Welcome to JA Careers in Communication. This is a program that we have written locally here in South Dakota with the permission of JA USA. We use their legacy JA Career Success program along with their JA It's My Job program, took elements from those two programs and worked with some local volunteers and teachers to create this 3-session program. So we just want to say thank you to JA USA for allowing us to do that here locally. The heart of this program is really to get the students to think about variety of soft skills and how they not only affect them today in high school, but also how it's going to affect them in their future. So throughout the 3 visits, the first 2 will focus on communication and then problem solving and teamwork and collaboration. And the final session is going to bring all that content together, and the students are going to really look through the process of getting a job and how oftentimes these soft skills are what helps them get the job, but we're also going to connect that sometimes it's the soft skills that help get us promoted and sometimes even fired. So it's going to end with mock interviews. I really love this program and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. So as we jump in, you're going to notice that there is a volunteer and teacher materials guide. And so even though I'm going to talk really high level, everything that I am talking about is here in the guidebook. Feel free to highlight, underline, sticky note, write in the margins. This is yours. And so please make it your own. You're also going to notice that we have table tents that we would encourage you to pass out in the beginning. Have the students fold them in half the long way and have them write their names, and then they can set them on the edge of their desks, and then you can start using their names to provide connections as you present throughout your 3 visits. You're also going to notice that we have a worksheet for session 1. This is an enhancement that we're just bringing in. So if you've taught in the past, this might be new to you. What we have done is we have rearranged this activity to really lead with personal brand. And then we've also added this worksheet in to help guide the students throughout the session. So hopefully you'll see that as an enhancement if you've taught in the past. So as you jump to the guide, you will notice the first thing we really want you to do is just to pause for a few minutes and talk about you. Introduce yourself, talk about your career, your industry, your education path. We would encourage you to just pause before you go in and think back to high school. What are some of the connections you might be able to make with the students? Did you have part-time employment? Did you have summer employment? Were you part of any extracurriculars? All of those things can help provide connections and rapport with the students. So we would really encourage you to take just a few minutes to talk about yourself and let them get to know you a little better. And then likewise, we want you to take a few minutes to get to know them as well. So set the stage, ask, poll the students, how many of them have ever had a part-time job or employment, or how have they worked with volunteer opportunities? And just encourage them to really share their experiences throughout your visits, because that engagement is going to help make the experience more fun for everybody. But also just remind them that if they are sharing examples from a workplace setting, to make sure that they keep things confidential and not share names unnecessarily, etc. So just always a good reminder for them. So what you're going to notice is that the main theme of the first session is communication and personal brand. And so what we're going to do is a little icebreaker where you get the students to think about some popular brands and products that they are going to be familiar with. And we're going to have them just do a this or a that. So you can either have them stand or sit to showcase what they would select, or if your room allows and you want to get the blood moving a little bit, you can have them go from one side of the room to the other. So either way, but we do want them to kind of get up and get active. So first of all, you're just going to use these examples like stand if you choose Nike, stay seated if you choose Adidas, stand if you choose Coke, sit if you choose Mountain Dew, etc. A few of the things that you can do alongside this is that you can just pause for a moment and ask them, what are some of the first things that come to mind when I said those product names? Or you can say why, like, why do you pick Nike over Adidas, etc. Get them to think about what are they thinking about with that brand. And just like they probably had an instant thought when you said the 2 options, I want you to consider and challenge them to think about they have a personal brand too. So what are the first things that people think when they walk in a room or when they're thought of? You might even want to just say, like, what are the first things that your teacher thinks when you walk in the room? Are they thinking, oh, great student, always on time, participates? Are they thinking, oh, always late, class clown, never on task, right? Or what is the first thing your friend's parent thinks when you walk into their home? What is the first thing your peers think when you are put into a group to do group work? Some of that can be really humbling, and maybe it's positive things, which is great. And other times it might be a little bit more negative. And the thing that we are going to talk about throughout these 3 sessions is the soft skills that build your personal brand. And so if there's anything that they identify over the next 3 visits of you being there, the great news is they have time to work on it. And we're going to focus more on soft skills in the second session. They're going to actually do a soft skills assessment. But you can share even now that if there are some of those things, or if they are thinking about what is the trajectory of their personal brand, what is their personal brand, there's always ways to grow it and improve it. So we want them to think about that as well. So to get them to think more about their personal brand, we want you to, at this point, hand out the student worksheets. And what you're going to notice is on the top portion of the first page, we've got some bulleted questions that they can use to kind of think about what is their personal brand. And this is really kind of a self-reflection, but if there's time and anybody would like to share, sometimes it's nice to just give them some time to share with the whole group a little bit about what they're thinking regarding their personal brand. The second portion of our time is really going to be focused more on communication and how communication is going to also lead into our personal brand. So the first thing we're going to talk about is cell phone usage and digital communication. So the first thing that I would just note is that across the state of South Dakota, there are a lot of school districts that have changed their cell phone use policies from the past. And so a lot of them are going stricter on not having cell phones in the classroom and just really limiting the amount of time the students can have them. So I would encourage you, if you don't already know, to check your school district policy and or check in with your teacher to see what that policy is, not only in the district, but also in that specific teacher's classroom. We used to encourage volunteers to have the students actually pull them out if they happen to have them there that day and actually look at the app usage and how much time they were on their phones. But we realized that that might not be viable anymore, but you can still ask the students, because I bet they know off the top of their head what 3 apps they use the most, and maybe challenge them as a takeaway to pause and see how much usage they're using, because sometimes it can be really enlightening to students. They don't even realize how much time is adding up when they're on those devices. But we're not just trying to put cell phones down in this session. We're really trying to get students to think about how can they use digital communication and how can they use cell phones productively. And the number one key that we really want to highlight is that whether you're in school or whether you're in a workplace setting, you need to make sure that you know what those cell phone use policies are, because oftentimes they have them, and usually there's a reason. It's not just to be frustrating, but it's usually because of productivity or safety, etc. So you'll see that come out throughout this section. The first thing you're going to do is just talk about productivity with a cell phone. What can a cell phone do? Create a brainstorm list on the board. Just have the students shout it out as you jot down these ideas of what can you all do with a cell phone, and then have them pause, take a look, and circle the ones that they identify that they think would be appropriate in the workplace setting. And what I love about this activity is that there's going to be some gray areas, and some students might disagree. And it really does come down to what is that specific setting? What is that company? What is that policy? And how that could be different. So it's not necessarily black or white, but it's a really great conversation. And it also showcases that we can use these tools to be productive as well. But we need to know how to do it in a productive way. And so the second portion of this section is all about do's and don'ts and etiquette. So you're going to split the students into small groups. You can have up to 6. And you're going to assign each group one of these 6 scenarios on the bottom of the front of their worksheet. And each group is just going to look at the one that they were assigned. They're going to answer that question, and then you're going to give them a moment to share their scenario and at least one example with the class. What you're going to notice is that on page 5, we have some talking prompts for you as a volunteer to consider. So if your groups don't share some of these, you can fold them in as you go. You will notice 2 spots. We have bright blue, bold text, and that is really some of those areas where you can tuck in the why behind policies and help the students to understand why they often have policies as you go. Okay, so then we're going to transition to the last portion. So you do kind of want to watch your time and make sure that you reserve about 15 minutes to talk about verbal communication and body language. And so the fun thing about this one is, again, we're going to start with just like a little bit of an icebreaker activity. You can have the students get out of their large groups, and now they can just work with an elbow partner or a group of 3. And they're going to use the back side of their worksheet to come up with a professional way to say this and an unprofessional way to say it. So before you do it, you can give them the example that's in the guidebook. And that would just be like, you could say, "May I help you?" And that can be very professional. Or you could say, "What do you want?" Like, both ways you're offering assistance, but one way is professional, one is not professional. And so that's what we want to get the students to say or to consider. You can say really the same thing, but with very, very different results depending upon your body language and tone. So just 90 seconds, give the students just a minute or so to brainstorm 2 different examples, and then have some of the students share. And even within the groups, you're going to hear different options. And that can just kind of be really fun. And hopefully they'll have fun with that as well. Get them to think about body language, tone, voice modulation, and how that affects our communication. You're going to notice, if you have time, because I know time is going to get tight, you can talk a little bit about conflict management. And the one thing we really like to emphasize, if you have the time to, is that really you can't control what comes at you, but you can control how you respond. So if there is a conflict that comes, you can either escalate it by the way you respond, or sometimes you can de-escalate it by the way you respond. And so we really want to try to equip the students to consider that they have a lot of power in how that conflict is going to progress or get resolved. And so we would love for you to share some examples, if you have some, from your personal experience or professional experience on conflict management. And then what you're going to notice is that, we just want to challenge the students to think about like how their mood, their attitude, the kind of day they're having can affect the people around them. And so we want them to think about how that ripple effect happens. And we also want to loop it back to getting them to think about how all of that is going to affect their personal brand into the future. So you'll notice that on the bottom of page 7, we do have a summary and review section that's going to allow the students to kind of just recap the key points. You'll notice that we have them listed on their worksheet as well, just because sometimes that written note of reflection can be very powerful as well. So that's really going to wrap up session 1. When you come back for session 2, you're going to notice the students are going to focus more on soft skills. They're going to actually get to take an assessment, and then they're going to get to do an activity where they're actually working with teamwork and collaboration. So enjoy the session, and we'll see you next session.